Hello and welcome. About a year ago, I guess it would have been in, kind of in the summer of 2019, I made a decision that I wanted to try and move CMPP269 to a new delivery format. From its traditional format where it was being delivered in Brightspace with about 40 mini assignments and a group of other assessments, to a new technology called Revel. So at the time, I started to do a study and collect data to determine if this new technology, this new Revel technology, was as good in terms of student performance as the traditional methodology for teaching this course. So today's presentation really is just to talk about the results of that analysis to determine if there is a statistical difference between student results when CMPP 269 is taught using a face-to-face delivery method or a traditional face-to-face delivery method versus using Revel. So that's what we're going to look at today, and I hope today's presentation maybe be about 15-20 minutes long, no more than that. So let's talk about, so this was a study that I've been working on where I'm looking at the student results, that is the student performance, for two sections of CMPP 269 delivered with two different formats. The purpose today will be to determine if there is a statistical difference between the student results when CMPP 269 is delivered using the following methodologies. The traditional face-to-face delivery, again with those like 40 in-class assignments, and then when I switched it over to Revel in fall of 2019. So let's talk a little bit about the face-to-face delivery using the traditional methodology. So there are face-to-face lectures. There's the traditional textbook. That's the Tony Gaddis textbook. I don't know how many students actually have it. It was available in an online format for about $60 Canadian. And then we had these large number of formative mini assignments. And they're formative because students can submit them and then I would grade them fairly quickly. And then they could resubmit them until they got these little mini assignments right. And these assignments would be typically 10, maybe 15, 20 lines of code, not very large. And they would be on a very specific concept, like create a for loop, create a while loop, create a branching if statement. So pretty small. And then we also, in preparation for the lab midterm, there were 4 midterm lab practice problems for practice lab final questions, and then a whole bunch of other assessments that were built into Brightspace. For example, we have these practice quizzes from the publisher test bank, the actual quizzes. We have some little mini assessments. These I built. I would usually kind of do those as we're going through class to add an interactive component to the class. We have the 4 major programming assignments, and then we have a theory midterm and a theory final. And those are multiple choice test banks that were actually built by the CMPP 269 instructors over time. Alex was responsible for a lot of that construction, so thank you, Alex. So some of the challenges with the traditional delivery method as I see it were we need students to practice writing programs, but we also they need to know if they're right or they're wrong. And they need some accountability to do it. I guess that's another big thing. They need some accountability to do it. Even when we kind of changed this traditional delivery method a little bit, and I did this with Doug and Sandy and with Cody and with, trying to remember everyone who taught, Nick and Mohammed in the fall of 2019. I changed it a little bit so that we had students do discussion forum postings for some of the mini assignments because the workload was just way too much for the instructors. But a lot of students did not submit any of those little programs to the discussion forum because there was no accountability for them to do it, right? And so this is the challenge we have. The challenge we have with 269 and maybe some of the other programming courses is we need students to practice, but we don't want grading to be so labor intensive that it's like impossible, and instructors don't want to teach the course. So if you had 2 sections of 269, you had 72 students, you had 38 of these mini assignments. There's an average, let's say, about 1.2 submissions per student because they resubmit. So that's 3,280 mini assignments to mark throughout the semester. And often 269 is taught by contractors and they're easily overwhelmed. So it's really a challenging course to be delivering. So I decided, well, I investigated this new technology and I thought, okay, well, let's try this new technology. I'm very excited about it. So this new technology, so here's kind of how the new delivery is different. Focus on what's different. The Brightspace shell has been completely rebuilt because there is a new publisher test bank. There are new quizzes from the publisher test bank. The face-to-face lectures have some slides in combination of using the Revel textbook. So actually they're all new too. But the big thing is the Revel interactive textbook, where they have they do some readings, there'll be some fantastic animations, there will be little self-tests that are multiple choice, there will be freestyle exercises where they have to write very short code snippets, and then there will be these quizzes where they write short code snippets. So the quizzes are never multiple choice, they're always writing little pieces of code. They're auto-graded by Revel, and then we have slightly larger programming projects. Now these will typically be, I'd say, about 20 to 30 lines of code. And those are actually also auto-graded by Revel. But people will typically write them in an IDE like BlueJ or Eclipse. And then they bring the code back to Revel and Revel will test it for them. It has some unit testing it does to really kind of take their code through the paces to make sure it works. You notice one of the differences, the 38 mini assignments are gone because they're replaced by these 47 interactive quizzes. And then also these kind of mini assessments to encourage interactivity within the class, they're gone because you're able to use the Revel textbook in class and say, hey, why don't we work on this little self-test right now? Let's do this matching exercise together in class. Let's do this freestyle exercise together. So as you can tell, I'm pretty excited about the Revel stuff. But let's talk about student performance though. So how was student performance measured for this study? So one of the things that changed between when I delivered this course in fall of 2018 and fall of 2019 is we got rid of the whole professionalism piece. And the other thing that changed is I changed all the quizzes, right? So I got rid of all of the practice quizzes and all of the regular quizzes, and I rebuilt them all based on a new textbook. So kind of over time, we all know that this is true, that the questions from the practice quizzes and the real quizzes, there's this leakage that happens, right, between the student body, and the quizzes start getting out to people. So I was kind of thankful to be able to switch to a completely new textbook because I knew that the students would not have seen those questions. But in fairness, here's what I chose to measure. I chose to measure what I consider kind of the key performance indicators of CMPP269. The lab midterm, 4 questions, 2 hours. A lab final, 4 questions, 2 hours. A theory midterm, which is 40 questions randomly selected out of a pool. The pool size, I think, might be a little bit less than that. And then the theory final is 50 questions selected out of a pool. And actually, I think the pool size is a little bit bigger for that. I think it's actually maybe more like 140. And those were built by CMPP 269 instructors over time. The lab final, we have a pool of questions for the lab final. We have like 32 questions, and we use this thing called a lab final generator, and it generates unique sets of exams that we give to students. So I'm very confident that the lab final between the two groups was of similar complexity, and same with the theory midterm, same with the theory final. Now you might say that the lab midterm was a little bit different in terms of complexity. It's hard to know for sure, but it wasn't. I did write both of them, And so there's that common factor. So here's the two groups we looked at. The face-to-face delivery. In fall of 2018, I taught 2 sections, 60 students, and then my face-to-face delivery for the first time using Revel technology in fall of 2019, and I had 57 students. In terms of the actual results, so this is actually all of the data where I'm looking at the lab midterm, theory midterm, lab final, theory final. So here are the averages down here. So the average fall 2019, its variance in the number of students. So I think I have that actually on the next slide. So the mean was 69.5%, the mean grade, and the variance was 18.8, and N, or the number of students, was 60. For the fall delivery, using fall 2019 Revel delivery, the mean was lower, it was 63.4, the variance is 19.1, and there were 57 students. But the question is that actually statistically significant or not? So my hypothesis is there's no difference in student performance when CMPP269 is delivered using a traditional format versus this new Revel technology. And how am I going to prove that? Well, I'm going to do a t-test on the scores on each group and demonstrate that there is no difference, or the probability that they are the same is actually between 90 and 95%. So I'm fairly confident that there is no difference between these scores. So the actual formulas that I used, if you want to repeat the experiment, and I've included the link there. So I calculated a t-value, and then I calculated the number of degrees of freedom. And let's take a look at what those actual values were for those of you who are interested in statistics. So the t-value was 1.72, and there was 115 degrees of freedom. Let's actually take a look at the table to see what probability that gives us. So we'll look, the best number I've got is 100 here. And then we have a t-score of 1.7. So it's somewhere between 90 and 95% probability that these scores are actually the same. So I feel pretty confident in saying that there's a 90 to 95% probability that the student results are the same whether you deliver CMPP 269 using the traditional methodology I've discussed, or if you go with the new Revel-based delivery methods. In closing, I just want to say some other things about 269 student performance using Revel. So that's my first time using Revel. And it certainly took me a while to get used to how am I going to present the material using this new technology. So there were some challenges for me that I'm sure would reflect on the student performance. And there were actually quite a few initial problems within Revel in terms of the self-tests and the freestyle exercises, and even some of the quizzes. They were generating a lot of server errors. So I had to work with Revel, and Pearson Revel, quite a bit to basically get those corrected. And those weren't really corrected till basically after the midterm. So my feeling is that student performance in the future should improve. So final slide here. If you have any questions, there's a phone number for me. Or if you want to contact me, that's an email. If you want to have the actual results and double check my analysis, I'd certainly be happy if anyone would do that. Otherwise, I'll just conclude by saying that I really believe that this Revel technology really is a step forward. It's reducing instructor workload. It's generating a better experience for the students.